Hi there, I'm your host, Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. In this video, we will be taking a closer look at the second publication by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman, The Long Walk. The Long Walk is a contest where there can only be one winner, a competition in which survival of the fittest is put into a most literal practice. It is a test not only of physical endurance, but also of will. It's a counterintuitive contest in which the only way to win is to be last. Synopsis as provided within the novel. In the near future, where America has become a police state, 100 boys are selected to enter an annual contest, where the winner will be awarded whatever he wants for the rest of his life. The game is simple. Maintain a steady walking pace of 4 miles per hour without stopping. 3 warnings, and you're out. Permanently. History and background. Although Carrie was King's first published novel in 1974, it was not the first novel he had ever written. The Long Walk is believed to be the very first book that King wrote in the mid-60s while he attended the University of Maine. It wasn't until 1979 that the book was published under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. There have been multiple rumored film adaptations of The Long Walk over the years, none of which have yet come to fruition. Horror film legend George Romero turned down the opportunity to direct the film back in the 80s. In the 2000s, Frank Darabont, director of both The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, secured the rights to The Long Walk, and he claimed he would get to the adaptation eventually. But he never did, and the rights to the film lapsed before he could make the movie. It's unfortunate that this adaptation didn't get a chance to happen, considering how great Darabont's work on the aforementioned King stories was. Shawshank and The Green Mile are 2 of the most beloved and critically acclaimed King adaptations ever, and I'm sure Darabont would have delivered the goods once more with The Long Walk. And finally, in 2018, New Line Cinema announced that they would be developing a film adaptation of The Long Walk with Andre Øvredal directing. Øvredal is known for his work on the 2010 film Troll Hunter, and more recently for the 2019 movie adaptation of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. At the time of recording, there is no word on a release date for Øvredal's movie for The Long Walk. However, the film is said to be in the works still after having faced delays due to COVID. In addition to inspiring film adaptations, The Long Walk would go on to inspire a great many authors to write their own dystopian fiction novels, in which teens are similarly pitted against one another in life and death situations. Most notably, Japanese author Koshun Takami cited The Long Walk as being influential to his 1999 novel Battle Royale. Or is it Battle Royale? It's Battle Royale with cheese. My apologies to anyone who hasn't seen Pulp Fiction, and also to those who have. Battle Royale is a story in which junior high school students are forced to fight to the death by an authoritarian government until only one student remains alive. Side note, Battle Royale was made into a movie in the year 2000, and while I haven't seen it in some time now, I remember it being delightfully gruesome and entirely messed up. You should watch it. While researching the book, I found numerous articles that dissected the story looking for its deeper meaning or hidden message, including the theory that The Long Walk was an allegory for the war in Vietnam. However, according to what little I could find directly from King, the inspiration for the story was something far less controversial. King's website states that in the early 60s, radio and TV stations would organize 50-mile hikes, and King himself participated in one of these lengthy excursions. The hike was apparently all it took to kickstart King's imagination. He said, quote, "I had that in mind. I didn't finish my 50-mile hike though. I fell out after 20 miles, unquote. While I have no doubt the basis for the story originated there, there are some underlying themes in The Long Walk which, while King may not have outright stated that he had them in mind while writing, it's unlikely he was not cognizant of the subtext or sometimes explicit messaging. Unfortunately, I was unsuccessful in finding any further interviews or commentary from King regarding his inspiration for the story. The overview, or my perhaps wildly inaccurate analysis of the story and its relevance to modern culture in the United States. The Long Walk itself, the contest, is reminiscent of the gladiatorial combat of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire that went on for 1,000 years. These state-sponsored violent spectacles were a means of keeping the poor distracted and entertained. They were used as a means of suppression to prevent uprising and revolt. Juvenal, a Roman poet during the decline of the Roman Empire, noted, quote, "The people are only anxious for two things, bread and circuses," unquote. The phrase is intended to suggest that in order for the ruling class to generate public approval, it is not through excellence in public service or public policy, but by providing diversions, distractions, or by satisfying the most immediate or base requirements of a populace that they most effectively allay their citizens' discontent. And that is exactly what the authoritarian forces controlling the United States in the Long Walk are doing, offering the poor and oppressed a violent spectacle to keep their focus off of the abuses of those in power, as a reprieve from the harsh realities they face and the moral failings of their leaders. Much like the people of Rome, the spectators line the streets for an opportunity to observe the carnage and to cheer on their favorite competitors. The rabid fans come out in droves. They cheer and scream, and they forget about their problems, if only for a little while. In reality, the US government and countless others have used and perfected these tactics of diversion and sedation for decades. The NFL, NBA, NASCAR, MLB, PGA, NHL, NCAA, WBA, WWE, UFC, and myriad other sports acronyms, while not the deadly competitions of yore, are undoubtedly welcome distractions to keep the general public at bay. It's hard to plan a revolution against the ruling class when you've got to prep for this year's Super Bowl party. I mean, I really want to overthrow the government, but I just paid a lot of money for the upcoming fight on pay-per-view. March Madness is a huge deal annually where people bet and gamble tons of money on athletes and teams who don't even get paid to play, with entire TV networks dedicated exclusively to sports you never have to be without. The seasons never actually have to end. Now, I realize that professional sports teams are technically privately owned businesses and not government operations, but did you know that the government subsidizes sports teams and that they use our tax dollars to cover the costs? Here's a quote from a 2017 US News report. Quote, "Between 1990 and 2010, 84 new facilities were built for the 122 teams playing in the 4 largest professional sports leagues. The combined construction cost was $34 billion, with $20 billion coming from public funding. Furthermore, 36 of the 45 new facilities built since the year 2000 were financed using municipal bonds, which are exempt from federal taxes, meaning taxpayers across the nation will contribute at least $3 billion more to subsidizing professional sports." Unquote. How very clever. They even managed to figure out how to make us pay for the circuses. Bread and circuses indeed. Not that sports is the only form of circuses on offer to the public. Why is it, do you think, that the government doesn't make Netflix or Amazon pay taxes? Could it be, perhaps, because they are the 2 greatest contributors to public distraction in the modern era, which provide an endless amount of entertainment, an invaluable commodity when trying to maintain a docile populace? So that covers the circuses part, but what about the bread? While bread is of course literally food, bread or dough is also a synonym for money. In the long walk, the participants stand to gain anything they want should they win the competition by incentivizing potential walkers with the promise of otherwise unattainable wealth and prosperity. They are willing to risk death in an effort to escape poverty. There are indeed parallels to this idea of risking it all for class advancement and financial gain in the real world. Much like the story within the long walk, the United States military, for instance, invites citizens to enlist voluntarily with the promise of financial stability, educational opportunities, housing, travel, and of course, all the bread you need to thrive, should the enlisted participant survive the experience. To go back to the aforementioned theory that the long walk represented an allegory for the war in Vietnam, it seems unlikely in some respects. Specifically, the long walk was a voluntary competition, whereas the Vietnam War drafted 2.2 million American men and did not rely on voluntary recruitment or enlistment. However, the commonalities between the story and modern military practices and incentives are irrefutable. The protagonists. While Ray Garrity is this story's main character, we come to know and empathize with a number of characters throughout the story. The walkers, while in competition with each other, knowing that only one of them will survive, form bonds, and in spite of their desire to win, they feel deeply for their brothers in suffering. They develop a camaraderie and a sort of class solidarity. As the miles and hours pass, they grow resentful of the armed soldiers watching their every move, rather than their fellow walkers, and likewise, they become hostile toward the spectators with their insatiable appetite for distraction and death. The reader is subjected to the growing desperation, waning determination, and eventual acceptance of inevitable death, one protagonist at a time. And the hardest part is knowing that nearly every character you meet will soon be dead. The antagonists. The Major, leader of the military force that escorts and dispatches the walkers, is the personification of the state. He is a mythic, legendary figure who represents the authoritarian government. We don't see the Major often during the long walk, but it is his elusive, illusory nature that maintains that veiled and fabled status, a status that degrades over time as the Major becomes a focal point of disdain for the walkers. He is the face of a ruthless, unfeeling, unsympathetic system that not only allows for, but encourages this barbaric spectacle to take place. The Major is another distraction, however. The impotent ire and discontent of the walkers is focused on a single man rather than on the tyrannical state that employs him. He is merely the face of the institution that pulls the strings, much like, say, a president or perhaps a press secretary. They represent the state, while the more nefarious members of the body politic work behind the scenes to further their agenda and hold more power than those who merely appear to be in control. And regardless of what side of the political spectrum you fall on, you can likely see some truth in that sentiment. Final thoughts. Well, that one got kind of politically charged, huh? Whoops, sorry about that. I swear it was not my intention to propagandize or preach. Sometimes I get to writing a script without a clear idea of what direction I plan to take, and before you know it, I'm ranting about tax policy and the dangers of team sports to the collective consciousness of society. My bad. I'm willing to admit that maybe I overthought this analysis just a little, but the more I sat with the story, the more these thoughts and comparisons felt legitimate. Anyway, on top of being a perhaps unintentional commentary on the nefarious authoritarian tendencies of the state, The Long Walk is a heart-wrenching tale of 100 people meeting a slow, miserable fate that plumbs the depths of the individual's will to survive, and the effects that impending doom can have on the human psyche. It's a great read, even if it hurts over and over and over again. New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and next week I will be starting a 3-video series based on King's 1979 novel The Dead Zone. The Dead Zone is a story of precognitive abilities, intrapersonal relationships, and, well, politics. Specifically, an unconventional, wildly authoritarian Republican politician who may or may not bear a striking resemblance to no one in particular. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.